Behind me is the Cupra Born V3 230 PS Eboost. Now that's a lot to say, and in this video I'm going to tell you all the differences between the V1, 2 and 3, tell you what it's like to live with this car because I've had it for over a month, and also talk about some of the negatives around owning an EV vehicle. So I guess, what are you paying for in the V3 form? So I'm going to touch on what you get from a V1 and a V2 and a V3, so I'll rattle through these, but in summary really, the V1, you get 18-inch wheels, you get kind of all the usual interior ambient lighting, auto dimming rear view mirrors, LED headlights. You also get the rain sensor, you get a 12-inch navigation screen, you get all the copper detailing, you get a front armrest, rear view camera, sports suspension, driver profile select, all the usual stuff that you get with it. You get forward collision warnings, as well as kind of your traffic light recognition system, and also some kind of driver alert systems, which I'm not a massive fan on. With the V2, you get everything that you got in the above spec on the V1. However, the difference is you get the 19-inch Typhoon alloy wheels, you get the heated washer nozzles, heated and leather multifunction steering wheel, as well as the augmented reality head-up display. For the V3, which is what we've got right here, we get everything that we've said above, but we get the 20-inch Hurricane-style alloys, we get the granite grey Dynamica seats, which are absolutely stunning, and we also get the massage support functions. There's not a huge difference really between V2 and V3, but I'll tell you what, the massage function on this is pretty awesome. So as we get inside the V3, this is where it really does. It's such a nice cabin. It is really nice. If you come down into the door cards, you can see the ambient lighting in here, as well as the lovely Alcantara. It's a small detail, the top part of the dash here. It feels like a trainer. The material is like a trainer type feel. It's very, very nice. You can see here, as I said earlier on, you've got the screen here for your kind of basic car info. Your gear selector, well, not your gear selector, your driving mode is your parking gauge, drive and neutral is here on the right rather than in your traditional center section, which allows for an awful lot of storage space. Of course, this very nice center tunnel, and you can see that bronze accent theme just kind of continues throughout the cabin. You get your smartphone link down here, very, very nice. And as mentioned, these beautiful Dynamica seats are just sublime. They're really, really comfy. And at the back as well, there's some decent headroom there. Decent headroom. Now, there are some negatives, of course, and the main negative for me, unfortunately, is this infotainment system. Well, this is a vast screen. It's so good in terms of its size and what it displays. I just find it a bit laggy. Look, it just doesn't. There's also quite a bit of fiddliness as well. Thankfully, there are some buttons here where you can do your max air for the front windscreen to demist, as well as your rear windscreen. Not sure if you can see that if it focuses there. Everything else, really, I just chuck Apple CarPlay in, and I forget about this whole infotainment system. You do get, as I said, the heated seats, 3 stages of heated seats, which is great. The other thing that you get is the heated steering wheel, 3 modes of heating, which is also very good. But again, this is it's not the most intuitive setup that I've ever worked in terms of a car. So that for me is a bit of a negative. I do like the fact that you've got your little Cupra button here, which you press and off you go. And then you've got your different driving modes. If I press here, you can see we've got performance, Cupra, individual, range, and comfort. Now you can see here on the dash, I've got 43% and still over 104 miles, which actually is pretty good, because one of the things that electric cars tend to suffer from is kind of that thermal management, and as we get into the colder months of the year, it makes it a lot harder for cars to hold full range, and I'll talk about that I think in a separate video, because my mini electric is terrible at this, but this car does a pretty good job at it, so I'm impressed. Copper accents here in the center. You get the adaptive cruise control. We get these kind of buttons here as well, which are nice. They are a bit fiddly to get used to, but look, as a whole, in terms of what I've used this car for, it has been phenomenal. Now let's take it for a quick drive. But one of the things that I have to talk about, where this car for me has excelled, is the living with ability. It's been great, and there's a reason for me personally why I think this probably is one of my favorite, if not my favorite EV, and it is the one that I would probably go and buy. £43,000 for this one, I think is good value for what you get. The range, you know, a full charge on this will get you around 250 miles, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty good. Sticking to Cupra, quick acceleration on a wet, damp surface. Here we go. It is pretty nippy. It's not as fast, and interestingly as well, My Mini Electric feels faster than this, but then equally my Mini Electric doesn't weigh anywhere near as much as this. But equally, the fact that this car weighs nearly 2 tons means that from a comfort perspective, it is awesome. It is really, really good. And I can go back to kind of some of the experiences that I've had with this car. And one of them is actually, I went over to see my dad who lives in Spain. I didn't drive there. I took a few days off, a couple of days, went to the airport, went out there, met my sister and her husband, and we all came back together. So when we got to the airport, we all had luggage, we all had, you know, whatever it is you do when you come back from the airport. The Cupra Born was a champ. Every bit of luggage was stored in the back of the boot without any fuss. 4 of us sat extremely comfortable in the car, and we're all of quite larger build, you know, we're not kids, we're all like kind of my size. There is a challenge, I guess, for can you even sit someone in the middle? I don't think you can, because there's a big crevice in there. So it really is a 4-person car, but for what I've needed it for, it's really, really done a really good job. It's done a really, really good job at being the car I needed it to be. Now, let's talk about what it's been like to live with from a charging perspective, because this is where it might surprise you a little bit. One of the things that everyone kind of came out with, myself included, you know, about a year ago, was how great the EV network, so how great EVs were in terms of value for money. However, as we know, if you're living in the UK and probably across parts of Europe and across the globe, is the energy prices have gone through the absolute roof. Now, I kind of gauge the price per kilowatt hour based on kind of my local supercharger, my Tesla local supercharger that I've used in many videos in the past. And actually, this is a 77 kilowatt hour car, and Tesla supercharger rates are about 60 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, I'll put a calculation up on screen to show you how much it would cost to fill this car up from empty. And it does beg the question, is it worth it anymore? Yes, you get better rates from home charging, I accept that, but not everyone is going to be able to charge at home. And you've got to ask yourself the question, would this, regardless of how good the car is, would it be worthwhile sitting there, plugging yourself in for 35 minutes of your day, losing 35 minutes of your life, and pay a similar price to what a lot of petrol cars nowadays with similar range will get you, and even diesel, that's another debate. Is it worth it, where you can just go to a petrol pump and squirt and go and off you go for 3 minutes or so and you're out? It's questionable. It is questionable. The other thing that I've actually quite enjoyed, again, is the quietness of it. It's very nice. It's a very pleasant drive. The cabin noise is minimal. You don't get many creaks and crannies from like poor build design. Ultimately, this is a German build, really. I mean, it's VW, although Cupra is in Spanish. Everything in here feels nicely built. You get all the luxuries of a kind of German built car, you know, German brand. The seats themselves have been super comfy. I always find myself pressing this massage button because it's so good. The driving position is really, really good. The steering wheel feels good. It has felt good. And I've really adjusted over the kind of mid-term loan period I've had this car, and I've really, really enjoyed it. I think it is a great car. Now, there is another negative about this car, which I said when I first ever drove the Cupra Born out in, I think it was Sardinia, where I went to for the Extreme E, that I didn't like. Oh, sorry, mate. Oh, look at that. Woo! That I didn't like, and that was the brakes. I really didn't like the brakes on this car. You have to really kind of put your foot down to get anything out of them, which is a little bit of a pain, if I'm completely honest with you. Now, what about kind of its driving dynamics? You know, do you feel that 2-ton? Yeah, you do feel it. But ultimately, I think where this car lies, you know, whilst Cupra are very much kind of, you know, Born is their sporty, you know, Cupra in general is a sporty product. And yes, there's an argument to say this looks sporty and it has some punchy acceleration. Did I find myself driving this like a sporty hot hatch? No, I don't think I have. I've spent the majority of the time with this car just enjoying it as a city car, enjoying the fact that it's quiet, enjoying the fact that I didn't need to let it warm up, enjoying the fact that I could pre-warm it from home so I didn't get into a cold car. Now, all of the kind of gizmos and gadgets you get from new cars is what I really enjoyed it for. I wouldn't say I kind of actively jumped into the car. Even in this kind of video, I'm not running around corners. I'm not actively trying to show you how fast the car is, because I don't think it's this type of car. With a near 2-ton weight, it doesn't necessarily provide you with the ultimate driving dynamics around corners. It does feel, you do sometimes feel its weight, and whilst it does have a decent center of gravity with the way the batteries are positioned, I'm not necessarily sure that the handling is of the kind of hot hatch level that you'd expect from kind of many other cars. And a good example will be here. You see we're coming up to a corner, and I wouldn't feel anywhere near as confident as I would in something that weighs a lot less. Again, those brakes cumbersome, that understeer a little bit. Whilst it is rear wheel bias in the car, it does try and kick the back out a little bit, but yeah, it doesn't fill you the most amount of confidence if you're going to drive it like a loony. But I don't think that's what this car is all about, whilst Cupra may try and position it that way. So look, I had it for over a month. What are my kind of final thoughts on it? I love this car, genuinely, I really do. There's a reason why I keep asking for it back, because I really enjoy it. I love the way the car looks. I love the interior of the car. It has great space in it. It does make you feel like you're in a spacious cabin. You sit relatively high up for a kind of hot hatch, although it doesn't really, when you put it in comparison to something like my Mini, this dwarfs its size. It is a pretty big car, but I have absolutely loved it. As I said, the infotainment I've jarred with. I've not really connected with it. Thankfully, Apple CarPlay has been there to, I guess, get me out of the deep end, because if I had to just rely on the Cupra infotainment, I think that would probably give me a bit more of a negative experience than I have had with the car. The brakes I've got used to, but I don't like them. And the acceleration, again, whilst it's 7 seconds to 62, it doesn't really feel like 7 seconds. It feels a bit more cumbersome, whereas my Mini is like 7.2, and that feels quicker. It's got much more, it's got a quicker pickup, it feels. But anyway, I might just be, nitpicking a little bit. As a whole, this is a good car. For the money, 43 grand, I think it's a great proposition. And I personally would buy one of these. Honestly, I would. I even spoke to my wife about potentially, when the term comes to the end from the Mini, do we actually have a serious conversation, look at something like a Cupra Born. So there you go. Would you buy one? Should you buy one? 100%. Genuinely 100%. It is a great EV, and you absolutely should go out and buy one.